Hey, it's Nikachu. Today, we're going to look at 5 very powerful modern decks that you can play on a budget that are upgradable. But before we get into it, I'd love to thank my sponsor, Mana Traders, the premier place to rent Magic cards online. And every deck featured in this video today can be rented from Mana Traders with their base subscription rate of $10 a month. And if $10 is too much for you, I got some good news. You can use coupon code Nikachu to get 15% off your first 2 months. So let's start this off with Amulet Titan. That's right. For $10 a month, you can get the core of Amulet Titan, the power of Amulet Titan, on Magic the Gathering Online. We've got all the regulars here. We got a Boreal Grazer, we got Dredge of the Elysian Grove, and Azusa to ramp yourself up. Get those land drops on the battlefield to ramp into that Primeval Titan. And we're not skimping on any of the synergy. We got the Summoners pack to find those Primeval Titans, to find the Dredge of the Elysian Groves, the Explorers to get that acceleration, and also occasionally you want to get Turn Timber Symbiosis to look for Primeval Titan. And of course, we've got the flagship card, Amulet of Vigor, not to mention Dredge of the Elysian Grove. I mean, it's not just for ramping out Primeval Titan, it's also just for destroying your opponent's board, sometimes shooting your opponent, thanks to the synergy that it has with Valakut, the Molten Pinnacle. So you get your Dredge of the Elysian Grove out, and it says all lands you control are the same, are every basic land type in addition to their other types. So they're all mountains. You get some Valakuts on the battlefield, you're shooting down your opponent's creatures, you're blasting them to the face, they've got no response to it. How did we make this deck budget? Now, I would say one of the first things that I cut, which I think also should be the first thing you should upgrade if you have the money, is a Cavern of Souls. There is no Cavern of Souls in the main deck to protect you from the counterspell decks. I don't think that's the largest loss in the world. There's a lot of other decks out there than counterspell decks, than the control decks. You still have access to a really wide toolbox between Bojuka Bog or Teleria West to look for the Summoners Pact to help find your Primeval Titan. You're going to still have very explosive starts. And you know what? Control isn't like the be-all, end-all of the format at the moment anyway. So losing out on Cavern of Souls, it's something, but I don't think it's enough to deter you from actually trying this deck out, and is definitely one of the things that you can use to upgrade. I also skimmed on an Engineered Explosives. There's usually 2, and if this deck is still a little bit too expensive, maybe reduce some of the Dismembers. Dismember isn't free out there. Dismember costs money. It's about 6 ticks each, but I think you do want to have access to Dismember right now. So I really, between Dismember for interacting with Prowess decks and other creature-based decks like Heliod or the Cavern of Souls, I decide, you know what, you guys could use some Dismember. So we got Dismember here. Beast Within as an answer to Blood Moon, or Torpor Orb, Damping Sphere, whatever, any sort of problematic permanents your opponents are bringing in from the sideboard, you're going to want to be bringing in the Beast Within. Now, I also skimmed on fetch lands. Some decks play, like these Amulet decks, they play a decent number of, like maybe 1 or 2 fetch lands, gives you some Valakut triggers, but also helps find your forests when your opponent is definitely going to bring in Blood Moon. So I compensated that with a few more forests. I don't know. Hey, let me know, Amulet community. Would you put more forests in if you were trying to trim on the fetch lands? I don't want to be totally cold to Blood Moon because you got access to Dredge of the Elysian Grove. All right, play your Blood Moon. Sometimes you just get the Dryad out afterwards anyway because you've got the basic forests available and you just completely ignore it and go about your Titan plan anyhow. Anyway, this is a super powerful deck that you can be equipped with playing today in Modern. Next, we have Budget Dredge. How do we make Dredge budget? We're just wiping out all the fetch lands. It's the most expensive component of the deck. What are we going to replace it with? Just a red-green mana base for the most part. Like, why not? The deck is mostly mono-red anyway. Look at the spells, people. What are you spending mana on? You're going to spend mana on Ox of Igonus. You're going to be spending mana on Burning Inquiry. You're going to spend mana on Conflagrate. You're going to spend mana on Cathartic Reunion. And occasionally we're gonna have some green in this deck because Life from the Loam is part of the engine. And yes, that engine gets a little bit worse because you're not fetching, putting lands into the graveyard to bring them back with Life from the Loam. But you know what? I think it's still going to be okay overall. You're still going to be dredging these lands into the graveyard anyhow. Sometimes you're going to be discarding lands from your hand with Ox of Igonus. So the lands, they're going to hit the graveyard one way or another, even through Burning Inquiry, for example. So because it is strictly mostly a green-red deck, just basically going to be playing with that sort of mana base. We've got the Copperline Gorge, the Crag Crown Pathway. We've got Forgotten Cave, Mountains, and Stomping Ground. Now, we got a few black sources with Dakmor Salvage because it does have Dredge, has utility in that way. And then when you have one on the battlefield randomly, you can play your Golgari Thug, your Stinkweed Imp, or even play a Creeping Chill if it's stuck in your hand in the late game. I hope it's not too bad. And of course, if you dredge deep into your deck, you can fairly reliably be able to lay from the loam that Dakmor Salvage back to your hand and prepare those plays later on in the game. But for the most part, so that's how we're saving the mana base. This is a super explosive deck, and you can see you can even get it on paper for around $200. Not too bad for an entry-level deck into Modern. Super powerful. Put the onus on your opponent to interact with you, and we have got also still the sideboard. You got basically everything that you would want, and I've taken some of the more expensive pieces out of the sideboard to add in Nature's Claim, which is basically going to be the all-around tool to beat any of your opponent's sideboard cards they're bringing in against you, whether it's Rest in Peace, Grafdigger's Cage, Relic of Progenitus, Soul Guide Lantern. Force them to break it or destroy it and get your game going on. Dredge is hands down one of the most powerful decks in Modern, and you can get into this deck, start playing Modern today, and upgrade over time when you have enough money to buy into the mana base. Now, I might be cheating a little bit when I say that this deck is one of the most powerful decks that you can upgrade, but let's talk about Bogles. Bogles, I mean, it's a deck. It's a deck. I mean, it's like a train. Once it's got the momentum, there's nothing slowing it down. It's going to run over your opponents like it runs over pennies, going to flatten them into pancakes. The strategy to the deck is very simple. You get your Gladecover Scout or your Slippery Bogle on the battlefield. They effectively both have hexproof, and then you put all these auras on them. And they've got some upgrades over the years. They have Lurrus of the Dream Den, and what I think that makes this deck affordable now online, and even a little bit to extent in paper, is that we've got a lot of budget replacements that we can play in paper. Looking at the online prices, the single most largest barrier to playing this deck, period, online has always been the mana base. And now with cards like Branch Loft Pathway, I think we can replace some cards like Horizon Canopy, which was a staple to the deck. It's a great card to the archetype, but we replace those cards with other viable dual lands effectively. Branch Loft Pathway is definitely a card that this deck has always wanted. And so if you like to watch your opponents squirm in their seat trying to figure out how to defeat this gigantic Bogle in front of you, I think this is the deck for you. And now we look at the perhaps spiritual successor to Affinity. We're looking at Hammer Time. Now, this deck, I mean, if you love the old style of Affinity of just throwing out some zero-drop creatures and then smashing your opponent with something like Cranial Plating, I mean, we still got that here. The deck essentially is trying to either kill you as soon as possible or play a very patient game and then basically grind you out and at the right moment hammer you to death. And the point is, actually, the deck is quite affordable, aside from a few really expensive pieces like Steel Shaper's Gift, which, I mean, 2 copies in here is already running us for $24, and Mishra's Bauble, 2 copies at $32. The rest of the deck is very, very affordable. And now the point is, I've replaced 2 Mishra's Baubles with 2 Welding Jars, which I don't think is too bad. Welding Jar, 0 mana, you're still able to activate Pure Steel Paladin's Metalcraft, where equipment you control costs 0 as long as you control 3 or more artifacts. Also could protect your creatures, and the point of activating this Metalcraft from Pure Steel Paladin is so that when you play the Colossus Hammer, you can equip it for nothing, because otherwise Colossus Hammer costs 8 to equip. And you can consistently find those cards either with Stoneforge Mystic or Steel Shaper's Gift. So we're running a little lower on the Steel Shaper's Gift, but we're going to compensate by playing more Cranial Platings, which, by the way, is still a very powerful artifact, dealing a ton of damage evasively, ideally in the air with something like Ornithopter, and getting the job done. So we still have a good density of equipment to go get equipped to your creatures. And also, we're not shaving on any of the other win conditions. I mean, we still got Inkmoth Nexus. I've said it before and I'll say it again. I mean, the type of person that wants to get into this deck, you want to get in there fast and go aggressive, but you're also also doing it because you feel a little insecure about your manhood and you just want to compensate a little bit. There's nothing wrong with that. Hey, everyone needs a little confidence today in this world. Nikachu's not judging. In a metagame where people are whipping out their primeval titans, you might need a little confidence boost. And now it's come to this. That's right, Mill. Mill was a big fucking joke. There was a time where Mill was just an absolute joke. Someone comes in off the street, says, I want to play some Modern. I was like, yeah, okay, here you go. Here's the registration. And they go turn one. They go turn one head-drawn crab and start milling your opponent's cards into the graveyard. And you can see it a mile away. You know what? This person's going to go 0-4 this week. They're going to go 0-4 next week. And then they might not show up again. That could happen. That's a real thing that could happen. But you know what? Those days are over. Now they're playing the Ruin Crab, and they're said, you're gonna go 0-4, I'm gonna go 4-0. This deck is actually serious. It's got a good situation in the metagame. You play Head-Drawn Crab or Ruin Crab and start milling over some of your opponent's key combo pieces. I mean, if you're up against Primeval Titan decks and you expertate their Primeval Titan, all right, good luck. Good luck, Primeval Titan deck. Oh, you want to play Valakut the Molten Pinnacle? Oh, I'll expertate that too. Good luck getting in the red zone with your Dryad of the Elysian Grove and your Azusa, you know? And the same thing goes for the Heliod Company deck. They get that Heliod Sun Crown in the graveyard. That's GG. You got to start coming at me with your Grizzly Bears. And so who's going to win that battle, huh? Who's going to, you can come, bring it on, Voice of Resurgence. I can block. 0-3 all day. So the Mill players, they got a little something going for them. But the problem has basically always been Surgical Extraction. Surgical Extraction, one of the most expensive pieces for the Mill deck. And as we look at the Magic the Gathering Online prices, the best way to shave the cost off the Mill deck is just replace Surgical Extraction with Extirpate, and this will work. I mean, it's the same thing. It's not for free, so you can't use Phyrexian mana to cast your Extirpate. It's okay though. It will still do the same job. It has split second, so it may not be mana efficient like Surgical Extraction, but it's going to happen at super instant speed. Your opponent cannot react to your Extirpate. And outside of that, you got all your usual suspects. I mean, it wants to slow the game down with their Fatal Pushes, their Drown in the Locks, and get more card advantage, which with Visions of Beyond, and mill your opponent out, Glimpse the Unthinkable, Maddening Cacophony. Also gain some life with Crypt Incursion, and also mill them with Archive Trap. So yeah, and all I had to do, remove the Surgical Extractions. So we also cut corners on some fetch lands. You know what's cheaper than Polluted Delta? It's Flooded Strand. And no, it cannot find Swamp, but it can still find Watery Grave. That's not too bad. And even though we are a little bit less on fetch lands because we're not running Polluted Delta, we still have an abundance of lands that we can recur to get maximum value off of that Head-Drawn Crab, off of the Ruined Crab. We can play Fetchland Crack. We can also play Oboro and recur it later if I have no other land drop. And also we still have Crack, Field of Ruin, get another land on the battlefield, make your opponent mill some more. In my opinion, you could do a lot worse for $100. This is ultimately the kind of deck that's for the player who just wants to rip their opponent's win condition out of their deck. Oh, was that your favorite card? Well, I'm sorry, it's gone now. So, I mean, if you're that type of player, I think Mill is the perfect deck for you to get into Modern. So which of these decks are your favorite, or which of these would you recommend to a friend? Let them all know in the comment section below. If you're interested in trying any of these out, I've got links to Decklists in the description. And don't forget that with the base subscription to Mana Traders, you can play and try out all these decks to see which one's the right one for you. So smash like for budget magic, and if you love videos like this, let me know, and don't forget to subscribe so you'll be ready to find the next one in the future. Take care, and I'll see you next time.